Good evening and welcome. That Irish language debate and Ming's problem later on. But first, it's been a long time coming, but it appears that tomorrow the government will announce a strategy to deal with the problem of mortgage arrears. And it is a huge problem, with 1 in 6 mortgages now in some sort of arrears. Since the year 2009, family home mortgages in arrears by more than 90 days has soared from 25,000 to 94,500. That's 1 in 9 residential mortgages. And if you look at the buy-to-let sector, almost 1 in every 5 mortgages is in arrears by more than 90 days. And as you know, people who can't afford to pay the mortgage certainly can't contribute much to the recovery of the domestic economy. Now, we'll be discussing what needs to be in that government plan in a moment. But we've got some people in our audience. George, how are you?
Good, thanks,
you actually give advice to people on how to negotiate with banks, but you yourself have been in negotiation with them for how long?
3 years now, just coming to the end of a very long cycle.
How tough is it?
I've worked well. It's been cooperative, to say the least, but we're getting into the meat on the bone now, and I'm in the process of negotiating the final hurdle, and that's extremely challenging, much more challenging than I thought.
Than you thought it would be?
Yeah.
But you can't tell us anything about it, can you?
No, I have a deal that is bespoke to me. It's created around me. I have committed to signing a non-disclosure agreement. I can tell you that it would be painful and it will be intrusive. And for anybody that thinks that they're in a situation where they can walk in and put a line through their debt, they're sadly mistaken. It doesn't work like that, unfortunately.
The things you can't tell us, because confidentiality means that if someone in number 5 gets a deal from Bank of Ireland, say, they can't tell someone living in number 6. This is to stop the person number 6 going into AIB, for example, and looking for a deal. Absolutely.
Well, I mean, I've dealt with lots of people across the country. I deal with about maybe 7 or 8 people per week through a thing called Insight. And I've seen sanction letters and offer letters from many different banks. So each deal is sort of created around the individual person.
But they're all confidential.
But they're all confidential. There are non-disclosure agreements in every case.
All right. I'll ask you, though, how tough it is, the minutiae. Like, tell us something that you'll have to give up if you do this deal with the bank.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's going to get really personal, and I would probably, if I was to think of something right now, I would probably have to prove that I've disconnected my Sky TV, and not only will I have to disconnect that, I'll probably have to prove continued disconnection for quite some time.
You mean they'd look at your bank statements to make sure you're not paying a direct debit to Sky?
Absolutely, and that's how minute they're going. Now, they will argue that they're protecting taxpayers' money and that they're leaving no stone unturned, but that's how difficult it will be.
So it's going to be painful if people get into this process?
It's beyond painful.
How often is the family home on the line in these kind of negotiations?
Having worked with maybe, I suppose, 40 people in the last 5 or 6 months, the family home in every occasion forms part of the discussion, if not the cornerstone of the discussion. Anybody that goes into this that doesn't think that the family home is going to be put on the table is dreaming. It will be on the table.
It could be on the table, like, to be kept, or to be, you might have to move out and downsize,
absolutely.
Or you might have to leave it.
It's on the table in every bank, in every occasion, and you know, you may very well end up retaining that house, or you may very well end up having to move out of that house and downsize. But the house is where the discussion is going to start, and it's very, very painful for people.
Unless, of course, the government puts some different plan on the table tomorrow, but that remains to be seen.
Could I just say to you, I've just come from a couple in Waterford who are paying interest only on a whole lot of rental property and on their own home. Because of the rental property, they can only pay interest on their own home. They've been told that they must move out of their home by Christmas of this year before the bank would consider doing anything on all the rental properties.
OK, speaking of rental properties, Jeff Scargill. Hi, Jeff.
Hi.
You have 5 rental properties, is that so?
Yes, yeah.
Are you paying any capital, any interest, or what do you do?
I'm paying all the interest. I'm not behind at the moment, but it is interest only, and the day of reckoning, will come. So it's something that I have to be conscious of.
When will that loom? I mean, if nothing changes with the government's plan, when will the bank come knocking on your door?
Well, it's like the sword of Damocles. This September it will begin. So,
and then there'll be a sequence of them as each one comes due.
Exactly, yeah.
The question of buy-to-let mortgages, I mean, the government have indicated that's where they're going to start. Mm-hmm. So it'll be starting with people like you.
Well, I'm looking forward to some sort of solution myself. I'm not expecting a free lunch, and I think that's the approach that people in my position should take. But what I would like people to remember is that when we were buying these properties, we paid substantial stamp duty. Obviously, we created VAT payments, employment. We were
well,
huge.
I mean, the developers created those, and you bought them.
Well, without the developers created them, but you know, we helped the developers do that. So we have made huge contributions in the actual purchase of these properties. So I think it's not unreasonable to sort of seek some form of cooperative debt forgiveness.
Okay. But if, for example, they say to you, flog the houses, that's it, we have run to the end of our patience with you, where would that leave you if they didn't give you any debt forgiveness? Would you owe an awful lot of money because of negative equity?
Yeah, well, I would, but I think that wouldn't be a solution for either me or the bank, because if that was the approach that the bank took, they'd become property owners instead of bankers. They would, the market, it would do extremely awful damage to the market.
The whole idea, though, is that someone like you has to sell. So let's take a putative figure. You bought for 500,000, you sell for 200,000. You carry a loss, and the bank carries a loss of 300. They'll pursue you to the ends of the earth for the 300,000 in the difference. Meantime, he over there buys it for 200,000, which will be serviced by the tenants and paying. So on one side, you have a regular mortgage and you just go into the bad debt column. Isn't that what's going to happen?
Well, I don't think it can happen, Pat. There are too many people in part of this equation. If this was just, you know, one or two people or, you know, a couple of hundred people, there are tens of thousands of people like me in this position. You said at the beginning of the program, you know, we're a huge chunk of the population. So, you know, this is a problem that has to be sorted out cooperatively and sensibly. And as I say, I'm not expecting a free lunch, but you know, the banks cannot take an overly aggressive position on this.
We have someone who has had a house repossessed. Patricia, when was your house taken from you?
2010.
2010?
Yeah.
And what situation were you in at that point that they took the house from you?
I was unable to pay my mortgage and I involuntarily gave back my house.
How much were you in arrears? How much did you owe them on the payments?
At that stage, I think it was running at about 38,000 in arrears.
And why did that mount up? What happened to your family?
My husband had lost his job. Within a couple of months, he'd already fallen into severe arrears, and that just escalated really fast.
They then sold the house.
They sold the house.
How much did they get for the house?
They sold the house, and at Christmas time, that went for less than 25,000.
They sold your house. How much did you pay for it?
The mortgage was for 169.
Okay, so let's just get those figures straight. You bought for 169, or your mortgage was 169. Yes. You owed them 38.
Yeah.
So you can add that to the capital of the mortgage. So we're up over 200,000 at this point, and they got 25 for it.
Less than 25.
And how much do you still owe them?
They'd probably come after me for the 140, 150,000.
You will owe them the rest?
Yeah, and the rest, yeah.
When they took the house from you, how did you feel? I mean, obviously distressed to lose your house, but in terms of, I presume you'd been in negotiation or at loggerheads with them for a long time.
We tried everything. We tried to extend the mortgage. We tried everything possible with them, and they were not willing to go anything with us. I mean, they hounded us day and night with this mortgage.
If you could have found 25 grand somewhere and bought your house back on the QT, could you have serviced?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Neighbours of mine was actually trying to raise money to try and buy this house back for us at the time, and this was bought from under our nose.
So who's housing you now?
The council, local housing.
So you were being housed by the council at great expense. Your house was flogged off for 25 grand.
And the money I'm paying on rent now could actually be paying that, and I could actually be given back to the mortgage. You know, we could still be there, and it is just a scandal to see what's happening today. It should not be happening, and no family should lose their home today. No family out there should be made homeless.
The problem is some people are in such hopeless situations that no matter how well the economy improves, they paid so much for their houses at the beginning, there's so much debt there, their circumstances have changed, that, you know, if they're told, here's a house for you, basically, where would that leave everyone else on the street who, you know, hasn't got a present of a house? Do you know what I mean? Yeah,
I know what you mean, but like, where are they going to put everybody? There's no place to put them. Leave them in the house, work with them within their houses. Do you know what I mean? I wanted the council to buy the house we were actually in to help us with that, and they wouldn't touch that at the time.
They wouldn't do it?
No, they didn't have the funds to do it.
All right, but now they have to house you at considerable expense. Wolfgang, you're a German person living in Ireland, is that right?
Irish German, I am.
Irish German, okay. What do you think of this whole thing? Because we, as you know, we blame the Germans for throwing money at us, at our banks, which they threw at us. We bought lots of stuff at too high a price. And, it's your fault.
You're right. I mean, that's right. And that's what I explain to my guests when they're here.
You're in the tourism business.
When I'm a tour guide, and I explain to them exactly that it's their fault. It's right. But you see, we have to look at how this country has been run. It has been run like a banana republic for many years, and I love this country. I'm not trying to be talking bad about this country. I don't want to run it down, but it has been run like a banana republic. Greed, corruption, and brutal ignorance. The banks have been handling the whole situation from the very beginning recklessly. From the moment they got the money, they gave it away to you. If you went to the bank and you asked for 350,000 euro, they asked, can it be a little bit more? Would you like a new kitchen? Would you like a car? And you took the money.
But going to what's going to happen tomorrow, we don't know the detail of the government's plan. Not even we're told the banks know the detail of the government's plan as we speak tonight. Are they right to try and do something to get ordinary people who are in desperate straits back into the regular economy so they have money in their pockets and they can do the normal things that normal people do?
Of course it is, but at whose expense? Who's going to pay for it? We have to ask that question. I mean, I feel for the people who might be homeless, but you have to also think about taking responsibility. The banks, definitely, but also the people who live beyond their means,
I mean, George, you want to reply to
I just want to say, you're quite right in what you're saying. And Pat, you interviewed Michael Noonan on the show last week, and I heard him say that he sat on the board of directors of one of the banks. I heard him also say, and Alan Dukes on this programme, that the family home is sacrosanct, it's protected. That is quite clearly, from my experience of dealing with people on a multitude of banks, that is far from the truth. This is a great opportunity for the banking sector to do the right thing in this country right now, and that is not happening.
The so-called strategic defaulters, people who say, I can pay, but I see the person in number 35 is not paying. Why the hell should I pay? They're going to get a deal from their bank in a few weeks' time. I won't. Why should I keep paying? Because the good for everybody in the long term is to get this economy going. For the person in number 35, he needs his economy back working.
Wolfgang? Well, I definitely agree something has to be done, and the economy has to keep rolling. But we have to make sure that the people who were reasonable with their own finances, did not live beyond their means, that they don't pay basically for the people who
this is the whole question of moral hazard. We have Carl Dieter with us, and also Monica Leach. Now, Carl, we don't know what's in the government's plan. What do you think has to be in that plan to make it work, to regularise the property market, to protect people as much as they can, but to get them spending again in the real economy?
I suppose the first thing has to be that whatever that target is, that it's laid out very clearly. Now, there's two different types of target. You could have a target on how many offers the banks make on restructures, or how many people accept them. But if it's based on offers, the banks just might make frivolous offers that no one would take up. If it's based on acceptances, they might make great offers, but people who aren't engaging won't take them up, and the banks will look bad anyway. So I think it has to be really clearly defined what we're targeting and what we're hoping to achieve from this. Because this idea of giving banks targets was tried already in Hungary in 2011, when their central bank gave lenders restructuring targets. And it was a disaster. Not only did it not work, it actually drove mortgage interest rates up and dried up lending.
Okay, so targets is not the way to go. So what is the way to go?
We don't want to replicate failed Eastern European policy here. I think the way to do it is to have an engagement process, and instead of even giving the banks any target, what the government should instead do is what they were given the mandate to do, create legislation. And by that I'm talking about the Insolvency Act. That's the solution to this. Not targets, not showboating, not holding a press conference at 9:30 that no one's invited to except for certain members of the media, and where all the banks and people who write about this are locked out. That's to get a big bang of an uplift of morale. The actual effective thing for the government to do is to bring out the personal insolvency legislation, as they have delayed in doing thus far.
The banks can ignore that, effectively. They don't have to engage. And successfully, people who've called for arbitration to be a necessary part of that legislation have been told, well, Minister Shatter will keep an eye on that, and if they're not engaging, well, then maybe he will come along and change things. It's too late for that kind of thing. This crisis has been going on too long.
Look, There's a lot of things about that legislation that people don't talk about, and the downfall of it in terms of a bank veto, I think, is one of the more minor ones. The lack of transparency on what deals are achievable is perhaps a bigger one. And I would say, for instance, like the lady in the audience who got repossessed, she should be looking, for instance, at Section 63 of the new insolvency legislation, which will make that unsecured debt something that she can basically get potentially written off. You know, it is fit for purpose. The legislation might not be ideal, but nothing in life is. It's all a series of trade-offs. What we need to ask is, what are we hoping to achieve? And is giving the banks targets the way to go about it?
Okay,
or should they instead do...
But, Carl, the question of buy-to-let, which they're talking about as being the first wave of repossessions, is that the right way to go? To get those properties which are in the letting market, which are not being serviced properly, get them back on the market? Someone who has the money will buy them at a price that will make sense in terms of the rents that tenants pay, leaving, of course, the people with the debts to deal with their banks. But at least the property market is regularised.
I think logically that's appealing, but buy-to-let properties are not always of a type that people want to live in. For instance, you'll have a huge number of pre-63s coming on the market because of the new standards in rental accommodation, which is statutory instrument 534. That has changed the whole market out there. They can't be let out. A lot of landlords out there are breaking the law right now. You know, is someone going to come in and buy that as a family home? I doubt it. So what you've got to have is an even-handed approach where your objectives are clear and what you're going to do to get you there is very, very clear.
Okay, Monica, what, from your point of view, you belong to Phoenix, the organisation that looks after distressed mortgage holders. What has to be in that legislation?
I suppose our focus is on the family home. And, you know, with 150,000 homes now in default, we would say that any solutions that come forward really must be based on a social engineering of policy. And I hope that's what government do tomorrow. That's what succeeded in Scandinavian countries in the 90s. At the moment, we're already giving mortgage relief to people who cannot sustain their mortgage repayments. And really, it looks at, it should look at incrementally increasing that support. But I think the key problem here is what actually is our definition of sustainability. And, you know, the central bank actually has all the information, they have the data, but it has not been analysed. We don't actually know what actually, you know, is sustainable. Okay, what are we talking about strategic defaulters?
There are a number. I know you say you don't actually come across strategic defaulters very much. The people who won't pay rather than cannot pay. But the kind of options that are there, there's banks, for example, taking equity in houses, parking that part of the total debt because it's now they own it. And maybe in the fullness of time, 10 years down the road, they will get their equity back when inflation has taken care of prices. Is that the kind of thing that is attractive to you?
I think solutions and certainty and hope for people is important to us. We're not in the business, I suppose, of providing the solutions. What we do see is that people want to pay. They're not strategically defaulting on their family homes. They want to pay. They want to know how much they can pay. And you know, I think a range of innovative solutions would certainly be welcome.
But do you accept that sometimes repossession is the correct option? I mean, if someone is living in a house upon which they have, say, a €600,000 debt and the house is worth a quarter of that, and there's no way that it can be justified living with such a debt overhanging them, that they should really be moving into a different kind of house.
But I suppose, Pat, I would say, you know, does it make sense if we have 150,000 potential repossessions, and let's call them evictions because that's what they are, and that's a very emotive term for us here in Ireland, but it's 150,000 houses repossessed. What do we as a state do with those? You know, we've boarded up houses. How do we actually police that?
You can say that, but it's never going to be 150,000.
But at the end of the day, Pat, no matter who, the taxpayer will pay, whether it is rehousing the 150,000 families and the whole societal cost of that.
Here's another notion that might appeal to you. I don't know, Monica, that they may have to repossess houses and therefore people have to leave. But if that comes with debt forgiveness, so that they end up pretty much debt-free, on the side of the road, yes, but then they can start afresh, absolutely brand new with no debt overhanging them. Because a lot of the solutions are still going to cripple people with debt unless that happens.
See, that all sounds fine, except for the on the side of the road bit, Pat, because these are families, these are lives, you know, these are not tidy little solutions. I think no family really should be facing eviction. There should be solutions. And, you know, Irish business people are well known overseas for coming in and actually, in a philanthropic manner, looking at housing in international crisis situations. And I just wonder if there isn't an opening here in Ireland for a private-public partnership or some philanthropic giving for people who are out there tonight and are wealthy.
Will only go so far. I mean, we are talking about the taxpayer being the ultimate philanthropist.
The taxpayer will pay anyway, whether you've got to rehouse people or not.
I think the important thing is to bear in mind what we're talking about is housing policy. Housing policy should be about affordability. Housing policy should be about sustainability. What housing policy shouldn't be about is maximising a person's tenure in a property they can't afford to stay in. This idea of evictions on the side of the road, it simply isn't true. The majority of properties being given up are done so voluntarily or abandoned. Last year there was 194 of actual repossessions. We've got 94,000 loans in actual arrears. You know, Russian Federation, with a population of 141 million people, only has 61,000 mortgages in arrears. Yeah. There's something peculiar with how we deal with our problems that means we never really get to the nub of it. And the whole thing that people are going to be turfed out, that's just not true. Because there are solutions where they'll stay in the home.
But it actually is, they will be turfed out.
There's a lot of solutions in the Keane recommendations.
But the Keane recommendation...
Hang on, guys, just before we hand over to Claire, because she's got something else on the agenda tonight, there is the whole question of people who are servicing mortgages that they can ill afford, and they've no money to spend. And they're the people also that Michael Noonan is supposed to be helping. They are servicing their mortgage, but they've nothing left for anything.
Well, people are not paying their house insurance, they're not paying their car insurance, they're not paying their health insurance, they're not buying the extra pair of shoes for school. You know, so the people we see in, there's genuine human suffering here. And just on the Keane report, if you go back to the IMF, the Keane report advocates a case-by-case solution. That is not working. That is the most inefficient
We will leave
way.
it there. Carl Dieter and Monica Leach, thank you. It's over to Claire.
Thank you, Pat.